There's a reason you don't see many truckers taking State Route 32 after midnight. It's not the deer or the potholes. It's the orange lights in your rearview mirror that don't belong to any tow truck you've ever seen. Elias had heard the stories, of course. Every driver who worked the Athens to Chillicothe route had heard them whispered at truck stops and diners, passed around like ghost stories at summer camp. But Elias had been running this stretch of Highway 32 for 3 years, and he'd never seen anything stranger than the occasional raccoon darting across the cracked asphalt. The stories were just that, stories. Something to keep bored drivers awake on long hauls. Tonight, though, something felt different. It was 2:47 a.m. when Elias merged onto the empty highway, his delivery van loaded with packages that needed to be in Chillicothe by sunrise. The dashboard clock cast a sickly green glow across his face as he took another swig of gas station coffee, his third cup of the night, cold and bitter. His eyes felt like sandpaper, and the white lines on the road had started blurring together 20 miles back. The radio crackled with late-night static, a talk show host discussing conspiracy theories about government surveillance. Elias wasn't really listening. His mind was on autopilot, his hands steering through muscle memory alone. He knew every curve of this road, every pothole, every faded billboard advertising long-closed businesses. That's when he first noticed the lights, amber and rhythmic, flashing in his rearview mirror with a hypnotic pulse. Elias blinked hard, thinking exhaustion was playing tricks on him. But the lights remained. They looked like the kind you'd see on a construction vehicle or a safety escort truck. The old school kind with the rotating beacons on top. But there was no construction on this stretch. Not at this hour. Not for months. Elias eased off the gas slightly, expecting the vehicle to pass. Instead, it matched his speed, hanging back just far enough that he couldn't make out any details beyond those pulsing orange lights. No license plate reflected in his mirrors. No company logo visible on the grille. Probably just a tow truck heading back from a call. Elias muttered to himself, but his voice sounded thin in the empty cab. He pressed the accelerator, pushing his van up to 65, then 70. The lights stayed with him, maintaining the exact same distance. The rhythmic flashing continued. On, off, on, off. Like a heartbeat, like a warning. Elias's pulse quickened. He told himself he was being paranoid, that the coffee and the late hour were making him jumpy. But then he passed the billboard. It was an old advertisement, rusted and peeling, barely legible anymore. Eat at Joe's, best pie in Ohio, with an arrow pointing ahead. Elias had passed it 1,000 times. It marked the halfway point of this stretch, a familiar landmark. So when he saw it again 3 minutes later, his stomach dropped. Same rust patterns, same torn corner flapping in the wind, same bullet holes from some long ago hunter's target practice. No, he whispered. No, that's not possible. He checked his odometer. He'd driven 7 miles since first seeing the billboard, but there it was again, looming out of the darkness like a bad memory. The radio suddenly cut to static, the talk show host's voice drowning in white noise. Then, cutting through the interference, came a sound that made Elias's blood run cold. A wet, rhythmic thumping, like meat being tenderized, or something heavy and organic hitting pavement over and over. Thump, thump, thump. What the hell? Elias twisted the radio dial, but every station played the same sound. He jabbed the power button. The sound continued, now seeming to come from everywhere. From the speakers, from the dashboard, from the road itself. The orange lights in his mirror grew brighter, closer. Elias floored the accelerator, pushing his van to 80, 85. The engine screamed in protest. The light stayed with him, impossibly close now, filling his entire rearview mirror with that pulsing amber glow. He could see the vehicle now, an ancient Chevy truck, primer gray and covered in road grime. But there was something wrong with its proportions, something that hurt to look at directly. The cab seemed too tall, the windows too dark, like looking into deep water at night. The billboard appeared again, then again, and again. "This isn't real," Elias said, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "This isn't happening." He looked for a place to pull over, to stop and think, to call for help. But the shoulder of the road had vanished. Where there should have been gravel and grass, there was only blackness, not the darkness of night, but an absolute void, like the road was floating in space. Then the truck touched his bumper. Just a tap at first, gentle almost, like a reminder, then harder. The impact jolted Elias forward against his seatbelt. Again, the truck hit him again, more forcefully this time. His van lurched forward, and something in the engine made a grinding noise. Fear gave way to anger. Elias had had enough. He slammed on the brakes, his van screeching to a halt in the middle of the empty highway. The truck stopped inches behind him, so close he couldn't see where its hood met his bumper. The orange lights continued their rhythmic pulse, casting everything in a nauseating amber glow. Elias grabbed the tire iron from under his seat and kicked open his door. His legs shook as his boots hit the pavement, but rage pushed him forward. He'd had enough of this. Enough of the fear, the confusion, the impossible repetition. "What do you want?" he shouted at the truck. "Who are you?" Silence. Just the ticking of cooling engines and the whisper of wind through the empty trees lining the road. Elias approached the truck slowly, tire iron raised. The closer he got, the more wrong it looked. The paint wasn't primer gray. It was covered in something organic, something that glistened in the amber light like wet skin. The windows were so dark they seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. He reached the driver's door and yanked it open. Empty. The cab was completely empty. No driver, no keys in the ignition. But the seats were covered in thick, black plastic wrap, the kind used by crime scene cleaners. And underneath the plastic, Elias could see dark stains, dozens of them, in shapes that suggested bodies had been wrapped there before. A sound behind him made Elias spin around. His own headlights had shifted, no longer pointing down the road, but angled slightly to the left, illuminating the woods. And in that light, he saw what the road ahead had become. It wasn't asphalt anymore. The surface was pale and ridged, organic and wrong. As his eyes adjusted and his mind struggled to process what he was seeing, the truth crashed over him like ice water. The road was made of teeth, thousands of them, molars and incisors and canines all pressed together to form a terrible highway. And between the teeth, threading through the gaps like mortar, was matted hair, thick and black and still attached to pale strips of scalp. Elias staggered backward, bile rising in his throat. That's when his own CB radio crackled to life inside his van. Escort service complete. The voice was mechanical, emotionless, like an automated system. "Please exit the vehicle for inspection." Elias's blood turned to ice. The voice continued, patient and inexorable. "Driver compliance required. Please exit the vehicle for inspection. This is your final notice." He looked back at the safety truck, and now he understood. It wasn't following him. It had never been following him. It was herding him, the way dogs herd sheep toward a pen. That's when he noticed the cars in the woods. At first, he thought they were abandoned, just old Junkers rusting away among the trees. But as the amber light pulsed across them, he saw the truth. They were parked in perfect rows, dozens of them, sedans and trucks and vans like his own. And inside each one, visible through the windows, sat a driver. They were all perfectly still, hands on steering wheels, staring straight ahead at their dashboards with wide, vacant eyes that reflected nothing. Waiting. Forever waiting. "No." Elias breathed. "No, no, no." He bolted for his van, tire iron clattering to the pavement. His hands fumbled with the door handle, slick with sweat. Behind him, He heard the safety truck's engine rev, a sound like grinding bones and tearing metal. Elias threw himself into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine sputtered once, twice, then roared to life. He slammed the van into gear and floored it, not caring about the direction, just focused on movement, on speed, on escape. The teeth and hair road crunched beneath his tires. The orange lights blazed behind him, so bright now they seemed to be inside the van with him. The CB radio screamed static and that horrible thumping sound. The billboard flashed past once, twice, and then the sky began to lighten. Just a hint at first, a graying at the edges of the eastern horizon, but it was enough. The moment that first pale suggestion of dawn touched the sky, the orange lights vanished. The road beneath his tires turned back to cracked asphalt. The radio fell silent. Elias didn't slow down until he saw the lights of Chillicothe ahead. He drove straight home, abandoning his delivery route, his hands cramping from gripping the wheel so hard. He stumbled into his apartment as the sun rose properly over Ohio, painting everything in reassuring golden light. He didn't bother to undress. He collapsed into bed and pulled the covers over his head like a child hiding from monsters. And for the first time in his life, he prayed. When he finally emerged the next morning, late morning, nearly noon, he felt hollowed out, exhausted in a way sleep couldn't fix. The previous night had the quality of a nightmare, vivid but impossible. Maybe it had been a nightmare. Maybe he'd fallen asleep at the wheel and dreamed it all. He needed to believe that. Elias made coffee and tried to return to normalcy. He called his dispatcher, making excuses about mechanical trouble. He showered. He ate. He tried very hard not to think about teeth and hair and empty eyes in the dark. Finally, he forced himself to go outside to check on his van. Maybe there would be damage from the nightmare chase. Or maybe it would be perfectly fine, and he could laugh off the whole experience as exhaustion and too much caffeine. But when he opened his apartment door, the van was gone. His parking spot was empty except for a single object sitting in the center of the oil-stained concrete. A rusted amber strobe light, the old-fashioned kind that would sit on top of a safety vehicle. And it was flickering, on, off, on, off. That same hypnotic pulse. Elias's breath came in short gasps. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't real. Then he noticed his mailbox, hanging open. With trembling hands, he reached inside and pulled out a single piece of paper. It was an invoice, printed on yellowed paper that looked decades old. The header read, Safety Escort Services, Route 32 Division. The date on the invoice made his vision swim. October 13, 2035, 10 years in the future. And paperclipped to it was a photograph, glossy and clear and impossible. It showed him, Elias, behind the wheel of his van. But he was older in the photo, his hair graying at the temples, his face lined with years he hadn't lived yet. And his eyes were wide and terrified, frozen in an expression of pure horror, staring at something just beyond the camera's frame. At the bottom of the invoice, in neat typed letters, was a single line, Service completion pending. Estimated return date, October 13, 2035. Driver will be notified. The amber light in his parking spot flickered faster now, urgent, almost excited. And Elias understood, with a certainty that sank into his bones, that the nightmare on Highway 32 wasn't over. It had only just begun. He had 10 years. 10 years to live his life, to work and eat and sleep and pretend to be normal. But the road was waiting. The safety truck was waiting. And on October 13, 2035, he would find himself on that stretch of Highway 32 again, whether he wanted to or not. The escort service always completes its route. Always.